Hey, what's up everybody? It's Mr. Ninja GFX here, bringing to you another speed art video. My speed art that I'm doing actually this time is for Aborted TK. He actually ended up reaching out to me whenever he ended up seeing some of my other work that I ended up doing for Heatwave and for Vanquish Gaming. And after he reached out and he was asking about how he can get one of his own, him and I ended up talking a little bit on Twitter and ended up kind of figuring all the details out to where I ended up actually making his logo that I'm working on right now. My actual painting itself is broken down into multiple different components. You have the actual stamp, which is what I'm working on right now, that I'm tracing out an outline on tracing paper of his actual logo, and then I'll transfer it over to my actual stamp itself. After that, I will carve it down. Firstly, you'll carve out the actual outside of it first, because any of the raised area, whenever you put ink on top of it, will impede the ink, so whenever you transfer that to a piece of paper. So what I'm doing right now is I'm finishing up the actual tracing, and then I'll transfer it over to the stamp itself and I'll carve it out. So the actual painting itself is broken down into multiple components. As I said before, you have the actual stamp itself, you have watercolor, you have acrylic, you have splatter art, and you also have abstract art, all crammed into one painting. Originally, a lot of different of the aspects I wasn't going to do, but I was requested by Aborted to actually ended up doing those for his particular piece, so that sets it apart from anything else. So I guess as Heatwave ended up putting it the best whenever I ended up sending her pictures of hers, it's like the ultimate fan art, I guess. But I spent a lot of time on this actual piece itself. After going through and actually looking over all the individual videos, or individual clips, the video length itself came up to a little over 2 hours, which doesn't sound like an awful lot, you know, for the gamers out there that are watching this probably. That time goes by in no time whatsoever, but for doing something so tedious for that length amount of time is phenomenal and completely mind-blowing. I really did not feel like I was sitting there working on that project for as long as I did, but I was. So as I was saying before, right now I'm carving out the outside of the actual logo first, and then I'll go inside with a finer detailed scraper to actually carve out the inside of the actual logo. That part I did not actually keep in the video. I ended up cutting it out because there was a lot of moments to where I paused, and I was actually in the middle of taking screenshots and videos and sending to Aborted, so I cut that part out. But what you will see is a transition after I end up finishing the stamp and showing a comparison on what it looks like after, and then from there I will start actually applying ink to it. After I ended up finishing the carving and I did try applying some of the ink, I did end up doing a couple of test runs. I do that with every stamp that I ever do, and I highly recommend it for anybody that does any stamp art or any carving, including wood carving. If you're wanting to do any ink transfers, whether it be to apparel, canvases like I ended up doing, or any kind of art, I highly recommend doing test runs. What it is that the first initial test on any stamp is probably going to be wrong. Sadly to say that it is a high percentage that will happen. What happens a lot of time is that the ink ended up setting in wrong on certain creases or folds that it's not supposed to actually have the ink actually go into it, and unfortunately it does happen to where it does leak over into it, and then you'll have to kind of, as you'll see in the video, what I ended up doing personally was I actually used a pen, a mechanical pencil, to actually take out the ink itself out of those individual crevices, so it kept the texture and the small fine lines and details that I'm doing right now on the carving. So as I was saying, it's broken down into multiple different components. The stamp is the first and was the most tedious part of it. The next part that I'll be doing after the actual transfer onto the canvas itself is going to be the actual background. which with another painting that I'm doing that I'll be uploading after this, I did it backwards. I actually ended up worrying about the actual logo first before working on the background, which I always recommend anybody, if they're doing any painting that they're having multiple individual layers, for them to start with the either background first or the logo, the rough version of the logo in the middle. So then whenever you're doing the background, if there's any screw ups, any way, shape, or form, it's not going to alter or mess up the actual logo or whatever you have in the foreground in the middle. It's just a rule of thumb that I kind of go by. But unfortunately, with another project that I said before that I'll be uploading after this one, I did it kind of backwards. I actually ended up doing the logo, then the background, or did all the logo, then the background, and then went back to the logo again. And I did have a lot of splatter issues with that. So it is what it is. You take it as you can go. A lot of the art and stuff that I ended up doing is kind of learning as I go along with what exactly I'm wanting to kind of do. And I love the different forms of art on how you can use that to kind of express yourself in any way, shape, or form, whether it be your emotions that you're feeling, frustration, anger, sadness, whatever it may be. Art is always a great form to kind of get those emotions out on paper or canvas. So it's a pretty cool little thing to do. So I'm getting towards the end of the clip here for the actual carving itself, and I do apologize again. I don't know if I said it at the very beginning, but I do apologize for the length of time of the actual video itself. As I said before, it was over 2 hours long of video. I have it on 400 times running on the actual clip speeds. So it seems like it's kind of, there's the actual clip of the stamp itself. And then now, as you see here, I'm adding the ink onto it. And you'll see me here in a second that I go back over with a mechanical pencil to take out some of the additional finer details, and I have a paper towel there to kind of help wipe off the excess. But as I was saying, apologize for the clips that I'm having. I did end up going from 2 hours to 4 times multiplier on speed of each individual clip. So on some of the clips, it seems kind of jerky or stuttery. It's just how the clips ended up kind of turning out. So I apologize for that if it looks a little funky at times, or if it looks like I'm going too fast. It kind of happens with, I didn't want to actually upload a 2-hour plus video. So what it is at, I believe, is at like 24 minutes. So it's significantly faster. But back to where we are now, the stamp just ended up getting finished up, and I got transferred over to the canvas itself. Now I'm going over to actually do the watercolor for the background. I start off with just a lot of darker colors, and then I blend it. So I do a darker frame, and then I go in with the blue. From there, I ended up going with different shades of blue, lighter and darker, and then I also add in some whites. And then I blended a little bit better with the actual brush. After the fact of actually doing all that, I didn't like a lot of what the additional design ended up turning kind of out like. So I went back over later on with acrylic and ended up adjusting it a little bit more. As I was saying before, guys, what I love about art itself is the fact that it's an expression, but then you can also, a lot of different of the art forms, it's all perspective based. What I mean by that is that the eye of the beholder that's looking at the actual art piece itself will see what they want to see, which is awesome. The only exception to that obviously is like the painting of like a person or whatever it may be. But what I loved particularly about this piece is the fact that from this angle it looks like an eye, possibly an eye, or like a tie-dye explosion. While doing it, actually myself doing it, I didn't even see it that way. I saw it kind of like a sunburst and a cool wave design in the background. So everybody will see what they want to see while they look at it, which is pretty cool. I love how art, you can do that. now, as you see me, I put away the watercolors and I am working now with acrylics. My acrylics, I'm going back in with all the finer details of the actual logo in the middle before working anymore on the background. So I have black, white, darker brown, lighter brown, like a tan, and then lighter blue, which is all the colors that I individually needed for the actual logo itself. I did end up not using both of the browns. I was originally going to add like a cast shadow to where I would use lighter brown and darker brown, but I actually ended up just sticking more with the actual logo itself and only stuck with the one individual brown, which I ended up thinking looked and turned out a lot better in the end, so I left it how it was. So from the looks of the actual video itself, I'm getting towards the end of where I'm done with the black. So now I'm going to start working on the brown for the beard, which I had to go over quite a few different times. With the transfer ink that I ended up using being blue, it kept coming through, which isn't necessarily a bad thing, but whenever you're trying to actually do a darker color and the lighter keeps coming through, it just kind of sucks on having to completely apply more and more coats of it for it to go through, which could not have been any more apparent after the very end of the entire canvas, when I ended up clear coating. Any paintings that I do, I clear coat, or you can use hairspray if you don't want to use clear coat, but it has to be the aerosol cans, just giving a heads up. But any paintings that I do, I clear coat, especially with a lot of mine being splatter art abstract, or as been doing more recently, like this one included, a lot more logos. It looks a lot better and cleaner to actually put a clear coat over top of it, so then there's no risk of possible rub off, which was absolutely horrible for that to happen, especially during shipment, since a lot of the logos and stuff that I've been doing lately obviously do not live in the same city or town that I live in. So I am finishing up. So I guess that's not white, that's actually the flesh tone. So I'm doing the flesh tone, I finished up the beard, and I'm doing the blue, or just did the blue for the cap. So looking back over absolutely everything, I think, yep, now I'm doing the TK logo in the middle with a silver, to kind of help it pop a little bit more. I did end up going back over that several times with it being a lighter and watery color, with it being a silver. It was more of a water-based, which unfortunately made it very soupy and didn't appeal very well to the actual canvas. So I had to go over several times to actually be able to get it to hold. So it looks like I'm actually getting towards the very end of the actual painting itself, which is awesome. So I just got done doing the flesh tones. I did the blues, I did the silvers, I did the brown for the beard, and then the TK logo. I had a hell of a time, I won't lie, with the headphones that he's wearing in the actual logo itself. I had a hard time on transferring it and getting it to look right. So Kind of glad that that worked out pretty well though. So now I'm going back in. Oh, there's the flesh tone, so I was using white. So the flesh tone, I'm going in now to actually do the logo itself on the face. Then after this, I should be working on darkening up the background a little bit more and going in with some of the finer details before actually starting on the backdrop a little bit more, because the backdrop itself has, as I said, so many different layers and aspects to it. Started off with a stamp. I did the watercolor that you just saw. I'm doing acrylic, which I'll go back into the background a little bit more with more acrylic. Then after the acrylic and all that is done, I actually end up adding a splatter art on top of everything else, and then I end up clear coating it quite a few different times. So it's coming along, and at the very end of the video, I actually do end up showing what the painting looks like after I'm completely done with everything. So it actually turned out pretty cool. Better and worse than I could expect. The reason why I say that is because my brother and I keep going back and forth about this. We perfectionist, I guess, is the best wording for it, and we love getting absolutely every aspect of any art project 100%, but the issue is that him and I are never completely satisfied with everything. So towards the very end of the actual project itself, I was sending pictures, as I said before, to Aborted, and I was also sending them to my brother, to where I kept asking him, is there anything else that I need to add to it? Is there anything that I should adjust? I was asking Aborted the same thing as well. And I kept changing up more and more of the actual project itself because I wasn't satisfied and happy about how it was turning out. But it is what it is. Aborted was completely satisfied with the project itself, loves how it turned out, and that's all that matters, that the customer is right, and the customer or client is right, and you know, if they are happy with it, then you're happy with it. So I had to put my artistic complications aside, and just kind of roll with it. So I'm going back in with some of the finer details right now with the flesh tone to try to get it more adamant and be a little bit darker. Went back in with some of the blacks to darken up the logo a little bit more, but there's the actual logo itself, on what it looked like after I darkened in everything and got it to where I kind of think that I needed to, or wanted to. So the silver that I ended up doing earlier, I didn't like on how it was turning out, so I actually ended up creating my own silver-ish gray, which I ended up using white and darker gray to actually mix it up and make it. So that's what you just saw me mix up, which I use on the headphones, and I also use around the actual border around the entire logo, to make it pop a little bit more. This is adamant, so whenever you're looking at the actual art piece itself, you look at everything around, but then your eyes get drawn towards the middle, which is obviously what you would want to do with, especially with this art project, because it is a logo, and it's for Aborted himself. So I ended up kind of worrying about that, and then now I'm going in with the acrylic in the background right now, which I'm making the sunburst around the logo a little bit brighter, so that it draws your eyes towards the middle. I do go back in with the actual teardrop looking, I guess, from the angle that we're sitting right now, it looks more like an eye. I do go back in on the eye and add in some lighter tones, to actually, as I said, break up a little bit of everything. I am doing some fine tuning here and there on the beard to make sure that it's filled in all the way. The flesh tones, I'm making sure that it's filled in all the way, and then I'm using the reference photo there, on making sure that it's getting as close to the logo as physically possible. Mind you, the beard is off brown lighter tan color compared to the darker brown of the actual logo, but it is what it is. As I said, Aborted said that he loved it, so I kind of stuck with it. So reaching down towards the end of the actual painting itself, before I do some of the splatter art, which I will for the third or fourth time now. Apologize for the length of amount of time of the actual video itself. As I said before, it was a lot longer. It was a little over 2 hours long, and I reduced it down to being a little over 24 minutes. So thank you for all that have been sticking around to actually watch the entire length of the video on how I ended up doing the project. At the very end of the video, I do end up giving credits on the music, and I guess it'd be honorable mentions on thanking some individuals and people and companies for helping out with the project, as well as more or less on helping me get through the project. So I do wish that if you did end up liking the video, to make sure you slap that like button, share it. Any good or bad comments, feel free to put down in the description below or in the comment section below, and I do read all of them. And I do appreciate absolutely everybody for sticking around for the length of the video. If you haven't and you skipped to get towards the very end to watch the actual ending of it without watching anything in between the middle to watch me or hear me rant, I do appreciate you sticking around towards the entire length of the video. If you did happen to skip, I still appreciate you watching the video anyway. And I'm actually about to finish up now. I did end adding up some white to help break up some of the blue towards the bottom and the top to kind of get rid of some of the gray. And then I also ended up adding in some of the white into the starburst in the middle to, again, kind of draw your eyes from outside in. And I'm actually finished up with it right now, so I'm going to show it real quick before I do the splatter art, which I'm doing right now. So the splatter art is going to go extremely quick. You're not even going to really see or know what's going on until it's pretty much done. But the colors I ended up using was I used white, silver, used a peacock blue and a sapphire blue, which all turned out really well. I love the colors on how they kind of accented everything, and then I do go back in with clear coating after the fact. Special thank you goes out to Nikon cameras, Team Caliber, Aborted, obviously, and G Fuel for helping me get through this entirely extremely long, lengthy process of a painting. Thank you again, and remember to subscribe, like, and comment.